council of dragons sat around an ivory table. There was one for every form of elemental magic. They knew they could no longer deny the threat of the kingdoms among the beasts of the field. It had been the topic of many of their meetings, and now with the houses of wyverns splitting and departing from the borders of Pious, the problem had to be dealt with. It has been 12 years since the fall of Haven, and the beasts of the West continue to thrive without them. A dragon with brilliant gold scales began. This sends the wrong message to our tamelings here in the East, and now a sect of wyverns hides from us in the desert. A large black-scaled dragon sat at the end of the table, his long whiskers flicking as he looked from dragon to dragon. If they wish to act as beasts of the field, I say we treat them as such and deal with them as we would any other common beast, he replied, and begin a war with the beasts of the field. Have you forgotten what happened to our forefathers in the war for the North? It could be much worse this time if the rumors of the demon king of the desert are true. A green-scaled dragon growled in protest. And let us not forget the lions of the mountain. They grow ever bolder in attacking our northern border. The gold-scaled dragon added. A woman sat on the far right blowing balls of hot slag on the floor and watching as they cooled, completely uninterested in the conversation at hand. What would you have us do, Volcara? The black dragon asked above the whispers around the table, raising his eyebrow at her apparent disinterest. The other dragons fell silent, and all turned to await the red dragon's reply. Well, Nige, we could recognize them for the lives that they are and welcome them into our society. The red-scaled dragon replied as she clicked her nails. Those heathens have no interest in being tamelings. Nige snarled. You are right. We will have to make peace with them as equals. Volcara replied. A beast of 4 will never be a dragon's equal. They could never follow our laws, much less respect our borders or our culture. A blue-haired female dragon scoffed. Have we ever tried to reason with one of their kings? Volcar asked. You would have us reason with them. Make a truce of sorts. Have the mighty dragons, greatest of the apex predators, fallen so far? Nige asked. Twin brown and green dragons that sat to the left and right both nodded to each other, in agreement with Nige that the idea was preposterous. Volcara and the blue dragon sat to either side of a white-scaled dragon on the opposite side that began to speak, but Volcara spoke first. Have you been to the wastelands of Haven? Have you seen the hopelessness of the living bones that wander there? Victims of their own hubris. That is our future if we continue down the path we on. Volcara insisted. Are you volunteering to make contact with them, Volcara? Will you be the one to lower yourself and your house to their level as the wyverns have? Nige asked. If it means saving us from the same fate the Phoenix have suffered, then yes. If you will allow it, I will fly out to the Red Clay Mountain and speak with the Mountain King. Nige stopped for a moment to consider his position given the circumstances. The dragons were surrounded by 2 kingdoms of fur now. Kingdoms that had grown because the dragons themselves had become complacent and lazy. Mere shadows of their ancestors that waged the war that shook the world and left its many scars upon the land. I will allow it, Volcara, under the condition that you tell them peace will only come on our terms. Nige replied. Volcara knew Nige did not mean for her to succeed. He hated all beasts of the field and wanted nothing less than to watch his armies trample their skulls beneath their talons. Furthermore, with the Phoenix gone, no one would be there to stop them this time. Still, Volcara knew she had to try. She was a fire dragon after all. Fire dragons held all life in high regard. And if there was to be a war, it would be the fire dragons, wyverns, and drakes that would be sent to extinguish the flames of life that burn in the mountains, fields, and forests beyond Pious. So as the sun rose, she flew to the north. The beasts of the field were stunned by the sight of her as she flew to the Lion's Keep, nestled between the 5 peaks of the Red Clay Mountains. Lions barred her way as she reached the gates of the brownstone keep, changing from a towering dragon to a beautiful red-scaled woman. Halt and state your business. A lion with a black mane stepped forth and roared, showing no fear or respect for the apex that stood before him. My name is Volcara. I am here to speak with the one they call Roy, King Roy, Lord of the Red Clay, and you will address him as such." The other smaller lion roared, but the lion with the black mane held his hand up to quiet him. "Volcara was it? Follow me." The black lion turned and walked into the large iron gates of the lion's den, followed by Volcara. Volcara marveled at the grandeur of the lion's den, almost rivaling that of the dragon's spire in Pius. Her wandering eyes stopped and were fixed for a moment on the statue of the false goddess, Sententia the Conqueror. Then she locked eyes with him, the great Lion King Roy. As he rose from his throne, the lions all around him began to kneel. "Your Majesty," Volcara said as she gave a low bow, not breaking eye contact with the king. "What do you want, dragon? Your kind has no business here," Roy growled. Volcara was surprised by his lack of fear and respect for her. Was this arrogance on his part? Or were the beasts of the field really the mindless brutes that Dragonlore portrayed them to be? "I have come on behalf of my people to address the great king of the beasts in the hopes that we could form a truce and end the trespass of our territory." Roy considered his next words carefully. He was at war on two fronts. It was not official in regards to the dragons, not yet, but he was in open conflict with the wolves of the coast. Roy had been making a concerted effort since he took the throne to unite the clans of Fur against the dragons and rekindle the fires of war. The sentiment, however, did not extend far past the Red Clay Mountains. The clans of Fur lost their will to fight after the loss of the North. But as Roy stared at the dragon before him with her red hair and dark green eyes, a wicked idea came to him. If he could not convince the other clans to take up his cause, he would give them no choice. "I will accept your surrender," he said with a grin. "Surrender? You misunderstand me. I have come to offer a truce to avoid an all-out war. I am not here to surrender to you. The dragons have no interest in conflict, but we will not kneel to you either," Volcara replied. Roy thought of his people and how the dragons treated anyone whom they considered to be a lesser. He also thought of the desert fox that spared his life all those years ago. "Mercy is a lesson you would do well to learn." Zion's words echoed again in Roy's mind. However, it was mercy he had shown the wolves of the coast, and that mercy was met with betrayal, so now he decided he would do things the way of the mountain. "Volcara was it? You will give this message to your people. If the dragons wanted peace with the clans of Fur, they should have never come north 1,000 years ago. The people of the Red Clay have no interest in a truce with the Scales, and if you wish to enslave us, you will do so only after you have stepped over the corpse of 1,000 lions." Volcara knew what this meant. It was what Nige had expected from the start, and why he made no effort to try reasoning with Roy. "I am sorry to hear that. Maybe in time we could work things out," Volcara said, trying to end the encounter gingerly. "Now it is you who misunderstand me. You have my reply," Roy snapped back. Volcara began to consider her flames, but instead of putting the arrogant king in his place, she gave another low bow, holding on to the hope that she could leave without incident. "Very well, I will return with your message." "My message? Here is my message," Roy replied. As he nodded to his guards, lionesses began to enter the room from all around Volcara. From this day forth, the dragons of Pius will be given a reason to fear the lion's roar. Volcara began to change into a dragon, but before she could fully change, a lion tore her left wing. She turned her head and baptized the lion in a wave of fire and slag, but another lion came from her right and grabbed her throat in her jaws. Volcara swatted the lion with her claw, ripping open her side as blood filled her throat. She tried using her tail as a whip and kept breathing fire everywhere she turned as she tried to take flight. But the numbers were just too much, and the might and majesty of the powerful dragon gave way to the will of fangs and claws. One of the lions handed Roy a spear now, and he began to approach Volcara. He took a step down from his throne, and Volcara locked eyes with him. With great effort she raised her head, and with all the power she could muster she blew one last wave of fire and hot slag at Roy. To her horror, Roy raised his hand and waved the fire away as if he were merely pushing a curtain to the side, and drove the spear deep into Volcara's heart. Volcara belched blood and slag as her head came to rest on the throne room floor. "Skin her," I want boots from her hide. And have a tailor fashion me a cape of scales as well." Roy commanded as the lions changed to human now and began cutting Volkera's flesh and peeling it aside, revealing the meat within. So began the war between the dragons and beasts of the field.